It is Friday evening, the 4th of November 2022, and as you can see, I'm over candles. But that's the way it works with this load shedding. This morning I listened to Wynand de Tooy and his morning talk, and I was stunned. He used an analogy that is so spot on that I sat after the show for about 20 minutes just thinking about what he was saying. It was amazing the way he explained the current global political fiasco. And I contacted him. We exchanged some views on the show he did, and I got his permission to use his analogy because that message needs to be carried out into the world because it is scaringly on point. And what he did, and I'm not going to try and replicate his work verbally. I'm just going to use the analogy and give my own views. He used the analogy of a lion tamer. Now, for the guys of my generation, we remember the circus days with the lion tamers. There was a big steel cage, and then there's the lion tamer, normally a very masculine guy with a whip, a long whip, and he was also always accompanied by a scantily dressed woman, girl, lady, whatever you want to call it, female. And then he had his helpers around the cage. And these helpers were armed with fire hoses. And their role is, if a lion should get out of control, they will blast him with that fire hose in the face and in the mouth until he gets back onto his chair. So they were there to pacify. And the role of that scantily dressed girl is, if things go wrong in the ring, she would be dancing around and prancing around and draw the attention of the crowd away from what is going wrong. And in Wynand's analogy, now that lion tamer, as a lion's coming to the cage, he will crack his whip and he will pit some of the lion, and they will each and everyone get onto his little chair, and they will sit on the chair there, and he will keep them on the chair with a whip, and when they have to do tricks, he also persuade them with a whip to do the tricks, but always back onto the chair. And in the meantime, this pretty girl will be prancing around here on the sidelines. So if things go wrong, she is there to attract the attention of the crowd away from what is going wrong. Now, in Wynand's analogy, the lion tamer is America, and that diversion doll, girl, is the WEF. And the guys around the cage with the hoses are the allies of America, and the lions are the rest of the world. Now, for 70 years, this lion tamer has been keeping the lions on their chairs. And whenever one should just dare to get off that chair and growl, the lion tamer will whip him back onto his chair. Think about Vietnam, Korea, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. All lions that growled and then got whipped back onto their chair. And every time when a lion steps out of his lines, get off the chair and gets aggressive, between the whip and the hose pipes, that lion is pacified and forced back onto his chair, and while that pacifying is happening, the girl will be dancing around, drawing the attention away from what is actually happening. And that's what the WEF does. They come in with their money and so, and they cause and finance these diversions. But with the Ukraine issue, the one lion sensed that the Lion Tamer is not so powerful as he used to be, and he jumped off his chair, and the Lion Tamer tried to use his whip, but the cracks were feeble. And then the hose pipes were brought in and the water was used, and that is when the sanctions were unleashed on Russia. And these helpers were under the impression that the Lion Tamer is going to get that lion back onto his chair in no time flat. But that didn't happen. The lion has had enough, and he turned his head sideways so that they couldn't spray the water into his mouth, and the water is splashing all over the ring, and the other lions begin to growl, and these guys start getting wild with their hoses, and this girl with her scanty dress and fancy makeup and so got drenched. All of a sudden that spectacular hairdo was no longer there. The makeup started running from the water. Her clothing, scanty as it may be, was getting soiled by dust and mud from the ring, and she was no longer able to draw the attention away from what's actually happening in that ring. And that lion, the whip was used like hell, but it couldn't keep it away. And that lion got closer and closer to the Lion Tamer. And at the same time, the other lions saw what was happening, and they smelled that this Lion Tamer has lost control, and they got off their chairs. And we can see it. China, Iran, Venezuela, they all are beginning to growl. Saudi Arabia used to be a strong ally of the Americans. They started growling. Saudi Arabia wants to get into the BRICS bloc now. So the Lion Tamer has lost control. And that is what's going on in the world today. More and more lions are getting off their chairs. And you must understand, the American population is about 4% of the world population. And that other 96% of the world's population has had enough of being whipped. Countries like Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, those countries were basically so intimidated and pacified and whipped and sprayed with the sanctions that they sat obediently on their chairs while their countries did not develop and their people suffered. But that is coming to an end now. Those lions are no longer happy on the chairs. They are off the chairs and they are growling. And if you want to be realistic, there's no way that that Lion Tamer can really survive if all those lions come for him. I don't even want to talk about that girl because most probably she's going to crawl through the bars and with some miracle get out of that cage. She's doomed as well. And this is what we see today. Russia's actions in the Ukraine has exposed the weakness in the West. The suffering and economic disasters that are now hitting Europe is beginning to dawn on these helpers of the Lion Tamer. And they see, hey, that guy can't keep the lions in control, and he doesn't care about us because he's inside the cage, we're outside the cage. And we can see in Europe more and more protests, more and more growling. And the reality is that if you look at the EU, The EU is actually, as a guy that I listened to this afternoon said, a fantasy. All that happened there is that umbrella body has taken the sovereignty away from all those countries that are part of the EU. They can't make decisions for themselves anymore. They have to follow what the EC dictates. And there's a lot of people now that are beginning to wake up to it now that they are seeing their economies evaporate and the winter is on top of them and they know there's a chance that they're going to freeze. Reality is kicking in. So Russia started the revolt. And I am 100% confident that America has had its days. America doesn't have the power anymore to suppress that revolt because there's now too many other countries growling. And for us here in South Africa, we have a situation that we are part of BRICS, but we also have strong relationships with the West. But it is time that we realize we are part of the Lions, and we must look at what the other Lions are doing. Because if we make the wrong choice here, now, at this moment in time, the Lions are going to eat us as well. And that is going to be really a shit show, which is unnecessary. So the way that the Lion Tamer lost control, and the Lions is coming for him now, and they are no longer deflected with the water hoses, and the whip has lost its crack. And I think you must think about this, because the way I see it, those lions are going to eat that Lion Tamer. That Lion Tamer is going to get mauled, and it is unnecessary. It was unnecessary. The circus management should have read the signs of the times correctly and decided to disband that Lion Act, as happened in the real world, because those days are over. We don't have room for Lion Tamers. There is no room for a Lion Tamer. It is the time of the lions now. Now, I hope you find this analogy applicable and enjoyable, and you can hit a like, and you can hit a subscribe, and you can share the thing, and give me your opinion here in the comments below this video. And I want to say again, thank you to Wynand de Tooy. That was a magnificent presentation you did this morning. I really enjoyed it. And I cannot bring it to the people the way you did. Have a great evening.